Oh, I was muted. Hey, we're ready for a new session. We have Jonas here. He is the CEO and founder of StakerDao, and he'll be doing a talk on using a DAO to launch and manage financial assets on multiple chains. And I'll let him take it from here. If you can give a quick background, and also if the audience can just confirm they can hear you, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Great to be talking to you today. Just like all previous speakers, let me know that you can hear me in the chat and we'll get started. So I'm really excited to be talking to you all today about a project that is being built on actually a blockchain other than Ethereum, although we have roots in both Ethereum and in Tezos. So I'm going to share with you something that's a little different than what you've heard about so far in the talk so far. And I'm also going to be talking about our project, which has two different tokens, and I just need to make sure everyone knows that we are not attempting to shill those tokens, and we are not offering those tokens to anybody through this presentation. So this is a technical presentation that we're excited to tell you all about. Okay, so I get a lot of questions about what is StakerDao, and we're building a platform that really is built on two main token models. And one of them is that of Tezos. And Tezos is a proof of stake blockchain. I'm sure most of you have heard about it. You probably haven't spent a lot of time looking into it necessarily, but the proof of stake model is one where the token holders use their tokens to validate blocks, and they do it either by running their own validator or they delegate their validation rights to a third party who runs the validator network. And as a result of using their tokens and securing the network in that manner, the rewards that come from minting new blocks are passed back to those token holders themselves. So most of you know that proof of stake is kind of an evolutionary type of algorithm sitting on top of kind of where proof of work has done all its groundwork. And Tezos itself is one of the interesting proof of stake networks that we're going to talk about a little bit here. So StakerDao is built on Tezos. It has one token, which is its governance token, the Staker token, and that actually runs on Tezos. And I'm going to drop into the chat here for those of you who want to geek out on things, an explorer that you can look at to actually see the Staker token in action. And anyone can shoot me an email later on, and we'll be happy to take you guys through that. And then the purpose of StakerDao is to use a community-oriented DAO concept to model to manage the launch and disposition of different kinds of financial assets. And so the StakerDao community is going to build DeFi products and launch them and run them. And the first DeFi product that they're building is called a blend. And a blend token is actually a synthetic asset that tracks a basket of proof of stake tokens. If you don't know anything about the proof of stake space, but you wanted to participate in it, you might think of a token like this as a really easy way to take a position in that space. Now, as opposed to the Staker token, which runs on Tezos, the initial blend token is actually an ERC20 token, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that going forward here. Okay, so why are we launching a DAO? My strong belief is that eventually all financial assets are going to be put on blockchains. It's just more efficient and it's more fair for the world over time. And so what we're going to see happening over the next decade or two is that all of these centralized financial assets that are managed by centralized organizations are eventually going to be replaced by decentralized assets managed by decentralized organizations. And most people on Wall Street and in big banks and mutual funds don't see it that way, but I think those of us who are at this conference, we can all smell that happening. And so we think a DAO is the perfect kind of model to build and manage those assets going forward. Okay, so the next question I get is, That sounds cool, but why do you care about the staking world? We've got so much rich content and capabilities on Ethereum already. Why worry about Tezos? Why worry about these staking assets? And my answer is partly because I've just spent too much time in that space already. Since 2016, in the fall of 2016, I read the Tezos white paper, got really excited about some of the features that were talked about in there, the proof of stake model, the governance model, the scalability and security models that were all discussed by Arthur Brightman. And it got me really fascinated with the space. I launched a community site in Tezos called Tezos Community. And then when we got around to launching the mainnet in 2018, I built out with some of my colleagues a large baker. And bakers are what we call validators in the Tezos ecosystem. And for a while, we had the largest baker in the Tezos ecosystem. Now there's over 450 validators, if you will, who are, the miners of Tezos. And Tezos is one of the larger proof of stake systems, but there's a bunch of others also. Cardano is going to mainnet soon. We've heard talks from Cosmos and Algorand. Near Protocol just announced their mainnet today. Celo is launching a proof of stake oriented stablecoin network. So there's all kinds of really fascinating projects that are going on in the proof of stake space. Of course, the largest potentially is going to be ETH2 when it comes out. And StakerDao is paying a lot of attention to the ETH2 space because we think it's something that's going to be very valuable for us to take advantage of as it materializes. One of the things that we've seen about the staking space is it's really confusing. And for people who want to participate in it from a speculative perspective or want to be a part of the networks, they have to learn a lot about how to do that. There are many more variables than just buying a Bitcoin and holding it, or buying an Ethereum and holding it. You got to figure out, what are the risk models for me to run my own validator versus delegating to someone else? And if I do delegate to someone else, can I trust that person? Which one should I pick? How much are they charging to run their delegation services? What's the risk associated with me losing my stake if they mess up? There's all kinds of interesting questions that have to be answered for you to successfully participate in the proof of stake ecosystem. And so for us, thinking about it from a DAO perspective, we thought that might be a really interesting area for us to lay down some tech and to launch some products so that we can make it easier for people. And so, as I mentioned, the market's changing quickly as well. So there's a lot of things that that people have to stay on top of to keep up with proof of stake. So now that we have been doing this for the last year, we've been taking a look at what we think makes a good DAO so that we can model that into what we're building. And I think the number one thing that we've come across is that governance is really important to get right before you go big. And we have been really not excited about a number of the governance projects that are out there right now that are managing DAOs. Like here, I have kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess. One of the big knocks against Maker these days is really, really low participation rates. Here's a proposal that was passed a couple of weeks ago with a 2.32% voter participation rate. And that doesn't feel very decentralized to me, even though that's how their system works. Compound, we know, is a fantastic product, and they're figuring out how are they going to govern successfully with their comp tokens, and how are they going to decentralize what they've done. But they already have had their products out and running for a long time in a centralized fashion, and now they're trying to overlay governance on top of it to decentralize as effectively as they can. And that creates friction. They have some of their investors who hold these comp tokens are voting against proposals, not because they don't like the proposal, but because they don't like how the governance process works. So there's a lot to learn about that. And so one of the governance models that we do like again, is Tezos. And Tezos, if nothing else, has really figured out how to manage decentralized governance well. It's got, over 100,000 token holders who delegate their tokens to over 450 bakers. And those bakers vote for proposals that are generated by developers in the ecosystem. And the whole process is managed on chain from the time a proposal is submitted to it being evaluated, to it being tested, to being approved by those 450 bakers, to it actually getting turned into the code and the code forking off, and thus all following the same chain together. And I think we've had 3 or 4 of these upgrades since the product launched that have all run successfully. And one called Babylon, which launched a couple of months ago. You can see here the comparison. It had over an 83% participation rate across all of those token holders. So it's really been an interesting model to watch. So what we decided to do is we decided to follow in the spirit that good artists copy and great artists steal. And so we basically stole a lot of our governance process from Tezos. And I'm going to drop a link in here for you guys, which shows you our governance explorer. And it's at governance.stakerdao.com. I see the link didn't quite pop up there, but that's what you see on the right here. So we basically, our governance model has 4 steps, and we have token holders, we have an operations team, and we have a elected council that are the 3 main players in this ecosystem. And those 3 players run through 4 steps. There's a proposal phase. All of this happens on chain on Tezos. There's a proposal phase, there's an evaluation phase, there's a voting phase, and then there's an implementation phase. That cycle happens once a month. So it starts on the 1st of every month. Each of those 4 phases runs for 1 week. And it's all tracked on the blockchain on who's voted for what got submitted, and what the outcome of all that stuff is. So you can kind of see that happening in our governance explorer there. If you look at it, you'll see just today, the first proposal, or the proposal for this month, I guess that was proposal number 5, was put up for consideration. Cool. All right, a little more exploding on what our governance process works and how the Staker token is involved in all this. So the Staker token, one of the things that we kind of decided at launch is that we're going to treat the Staker token, at least initially, as a security, because it's very closely held. We're still very centralized. We're not completely decentralized out of the gate. Our goal is to become very decentralized. Hopefully the Staker token will become a utility someday, but today it's a security. There's about 30 or 40 institutional investors, accredited investors and others who have purchased it, just like you would be raising money in a startup, if you will. And those those investors are holding tokens on Tezos that represent essentially a share in this company that runs the DAO. And the company is a Cayman corporation. The shares are tokenized as DAO shares. And one of the main things that those token holders do is they elect the council. The token holders, along with the operations team, submit proposals. The council votes on those proposals. When those proposals are approved, the operations team implements them. And our goal is to be able to produce products that are of interest to the broader DeFi community, both on Tezos, on Ethereum, and on other chains over time, that are interesting. So another thing that we learned is that if you want to attract investments for these cool DeFi products that scale beyond just experimenters, you need to put a good list of people and a good team in place that people can trust. And so we went out and we recruited a bunch of names in the crypto space to become Staker token holders, so that they could participate in our governance process, so that they could take a spot on this governing council from an elected perspective. And then we started hiring some top talent to staff our operations team. Eventually, the operations team will be hired and fired by the council. The council will be hired and fired by the token holders. And it'll all be decentralized in that sense, and hopefully we'll end up with hundreds or thousands of staker token holders over time. But for now, we're getting started in a more quasi-centralized way. Now that process that we have in place has used the governance process over the last 4 months to select the first economic product that they're launching. And that product, as I mentioned at the beginning, is actually an ERC20 token, and it's called Blend. And the Blend token itself is a basket token. It's kind of like you would say a stable coin, but its stability is based on the underlying proof of stake assets that are in the basket. So it's kind of a weird kind of hybrid thing. But we think it's going to be something that's going to become pretty compelling in some of the DeFi ecosystems once you see what you can do with a blend. And so the Blend token itself, it has a launch process on CoinList. People who buy the token through that process will be then holding a token that has these underlying assets. So if you hold one Blend token, you're really holding a share of Tezos and Cosmos and Algorand. Those were the first 3 assets that were selected through the governance process to be part of this Blend token. And because all 3 of those are proof of stake tokens, and this whole basket is about proof of stake tokens, the underlying assets are actually generating rewards through the staking process all the time. And so those rewards that come into this process then essentially become like profits for the Blend token holders. But we don't want to distribute profits to anybody here. So instead, we have a buyback and burn mechanism with those tokens, which allows the Blend holders to sell their tokens back to us for the rewards. And everyone gets the benefit of that because the overall supply of the Blend token shrinks over time. So that's kind of how this Blend process is going to work. And one of the questions we got pretty much heavily is, what is in this Blend basket? Why did you select these particular tokens? And this was a really interesting challenge for us to figure out an algorithm that the council would approve, that the community was interested in using to screen out tokens. And so essentially, there are probably 150 tokens on your coin market cap site that are listed as proof of stake tokens. But at the end of the day, we want to provide a product that is interesting to the DeFi community, that has long-term value associated with it. And so we started looking at what are the different algorithmic models we could put in place. And one of them was we wanted to have a couple of hurdles that we could use. And one of them was how big is the market cap of the proof of stake token? We wanted to rule out the small market cap products, and so we selected a minimum of $300 million market cap for any token that would be part of this basket. We also looked at liquidity and wanted to make sure that these were tokens that were trading on a recurring basis. So then that cut us down to a couple dozen tokens, and we then wanted to figure out, how do you create a model that has some factors in it that would represent the right tokens to have in this basket. And we decided there were 2 main factors to look at. One is what we're calling the staking ratio. And the staking ratio really represents what percentage of the tokens in circulation are actually being staked by those holders, either directly running their own validators or staking through delegation to validators. And not surprisingly, there's a wide range of staking, but it seems to us that a higher staking ratio represents more confidence in that product from a long-term perspective. lower staking ratio represents more of kind of a trading or speculative stance, we think. So we wanted to reward tokens with a higher staking ratio in this model. And then the other thing we wanted to look at is the reward ratio. Tokens that returned a higher percentage would necessarily provide potentially more return for blend holders than a lower percentage. And so that became the second factor of this model. We picked the top three when this all came out, and that turned into Algorand, Cosmos, and Tezos. And I appreciate some of you guys are dropping questions into the chat. Those are all great questions, and we'll dive into those once we're done with the presentation. But keep your questions coming in the chat. I appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, and so then we back tested this performance model. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but at the end of the day, we think that the blend token with those three underlying assets is going to be something that's going to be pretty compelling for folks. Once we get the blend token into the market, our intention is not necessarily to stop there. We really are interested in letting the DAO start to make decisions about what other kinds of assets it wants to launch into the ecosystem. And so we've started polling our DAO members and the community in general, and we've gotten a number of different areas that we are going to be researching as a community to see what makes sense. So we've got this blue chip product and blend, but we also think there's a bunch of other new POS token projects that are emerging that could very well provide value over the long run. We think that pre-launch tokens could be an interesting product to bring to market. And then there's this whole NFT space, which we've spent some time talking about here at this conference. And we're really kind of excited about all of the NFT collectible products that are out there. And you could imagine baskets of those products being available to in this kind of model. One of the things that Tezos is becoming known for is security tokens that represent real estate projects. And so that's something that we want to take a look at it as well. Basically, any type of asset that you have today in a centralized environment, ultimately, as I said, is going to become decentralized. And we think that a project like StakerDao could be something that could help launch those kinds of products. So that's really the summary of what we're doing at StakerDao. On the screen here are some contact points here for you. I see more mentioned StakerDao on the chat as well there. So we'd love to get some feedback from you all about what you think about this project and talk to you about how you could help out, get involved. The Tezos ecosystem is always recruiting devs as well, as you all probably know. If you have questions about that ecosystem, my team and I have spent a lot of time there, so we'd be happy to answer your questions there as well. So I'm going to pause there, and I'll turn over to some of the questions we have here. So Frank says that the problems that we're facing sound a lot like the same problems that Maker and Compound have, which is how to decentralize. And I think that's totally fair, Frank. I think we kind of went into this with our eyes wide open on this topic, and the way that we've structured our entity, our Cayman entity, and the way that we've structured the Staker tokens to be securities, basically is by the book from a regulatory perspective, if you will. We're not trying to say that these Staker tokens are utility tokens, and we're saying they're profit. They're going to collect profit, and profit's going to be distributed back to those token holders over time. And as a result, we're going to treat it as such. Now, if the markets evolve to a point where you can pass certain types of tests to prove that you are decentralized, and if StakerDao is able to prove that it is through those tests, then by all means, the community will have the choice to decide if it wants to go in that direction. But we didn't want to do anything now that could preclude us from running this business over the long term if it takes 10 years before decentralization emerges through these kinds of DAO models. T asks, why couldn't you just get direct exposure to those tokens? So T, totally you can. I think that all of us who are in crypto today, we're all the early adopters of crypto. We all, to a greater or lesser degree, feel comfortable with the complexities of things like staking and the complications of picking validators and worrying about the risk models associated with getting slashed and all those kinds of things, obviously to a greater or lesser degree. But I'm thinking about, and I think our community is thinking about, what is the next wave of people who are going to come to crypto, the early majority as they cross that chasm? What are they going to need to have in order to be successful? And it's probably not the same products that exist in the same ways today. And a lot of the talks we've seen here today on this conference are about new UIs and making things more user friendly. And so we're trying to take that same ethos to the proof of stake space and make it more user friendly for people to participate in these chains. Okay. How does a blend stake differ from 3 individual stakes? Are the contributors getting a better return because the stake is being pooled? No, they're not getting a better return or a worse return per se. They're doing, they're getting a lower beta, if you will, because the variability of those 3 tokens will balance themselves out more than any one of the individual tokens itself. Because we have this kind of innovative buyback and burn model associated with the blend token and the rewards that are generated, some people might have a tax advantaged model associated with that, depending on their jurisdiction. Not a tax lawyer. But in general, I think our main value proposition to the institutional folks is it's easier, it's managed, it's going to evolve over time. For example, the blend basket today has the 3 tokens we've talked about, but it's going to probably change going forward. Polkadot feels like it's something that the community might want to add into the blend basket. ETH2, when it comes out, might need to be in the blend basket, of course. So it's kind of a managed asset, if you will, but in a way that the holders of the blend token aren't going to have to do a lot in order to have that refreshed and up to date. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions here in the ask question phrase down here at the bottom. Are you running StakerDao as the same singular system existing simultaneously on Tezos, Cosmos, and Algorand? I'm confused. So you're not committed to Tezos. So the Staker token runs on Tezos, and it only runs on Tezos. We have smart contracts that run on Ethereum that manage the blend token. And we have staking contracts that run on Tezos, Cosmos, and Algorand that manage the staking of those 3 tokens. And in the middle, we have an operations team that is managing the custody of the assets. So this is not some magical atomic model that is managing all of those things in a completely decentralized way. Again, it's something that we're going to get to over time, maybe. But because we're treating StakerDao as a company with security tokens, we also have the ability to have a team of people that company hires to do the custody management work of those tokens as necessary.
Awesome. This is a really fantastic talk. We're unfortunately out of time, so we have to transition to the next one.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, everybody.
Cool. Thank you. And feel free to follow them on Twitter, StakerDao. Thank you.